Okay, our next speaker is Laura Morrison, Lol Morrison to her friends, who's going to share with us her perspective on the people imperative.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello and welcome. So today I'm going to talk to you about the people imperative, and you're probably wondering, what on earth is that? I have a philosophy, and it's a philosophy that organisations are driven by great people. Great decision making is driven when we actually support and nurture the people in organisations, whether that's a traditional or a non-traditional organisation. So, to begin, let's think about what are organisations actually for? Now, an organisation can be what we see as a business, a big logo, or it can be something smaller. It can be a community school. It can be a group of people who get together to create something for a purpose. They have an identity and a reason to come together because they want to fulfill an objective. So when we think about what organisations are for, they're not just for the creation of profit. And the best organisations have a number of factors in common. And the ones that work best and most effectively that I've observed in 20 years in business are those which value people. Now, I began work at a time where we still had personnel departments. We had valuing people as an objective for organisations. And over the years, I've seen that shift to the references of people as human resources, human capital. And it dehumanises the person. It dehumanises the decision-making process. And we forget what organisations are there to do. They're to support us, they're to enhance our experience, and to make sure that we achieve collectively more than we can achieve alone. So the best organisations also value and understand the language of happiness. They appreciate the fact that when people go to work, they do their best work, not when they're under survival conditions, but when they feel that their work is valued, is meaningful, and allows them to flourish, where they can bring their best contribution forward. So they encourage experimentation. They create cultures where learning is valued, where it is okay not to make mistakes all the time, but occasionally in the pursuit of the new, to try new things, to try doing things differently. And they cultivate a culture where calculated risk is valued. And this is one of the things that we see in the discussions around the banking sector, particularly, that decision-making would be different because women naturally coming to the fore in leadership have a different perception of what risk and calculated risk looks like, and also a different perception of the things that matter when we're taking risks. So what value do we place? What is acceptable as a risk and what is not acceptable? And those lines fall in quite different places. People who are well adjusted, who are happy in their work, can take those decisions from a better place than somebody who sees themselves disconnected from the organisation and perhaps as just a number. So why does any of this matter? Because organisations need to cultivate trust. They need to cultivate trust with the people who buy their products, with the people who supply them, and most importantly, with the people who work for them, that represent their brand every single day. It also matters in creating environments for innovation. If people are scared to not follow a particular template in an organisation to fit in with the rules, with the way somebody in that industry is perceived to be. We are just going to get herd mentality, and herds do not make the best decisions. We need independent thinkers and people who can operate without fear to be able to bring innovation into organisations. And the third, surprisingly, is profitability. Now, in my corporate career, I did a little bit of experimentation around this. And this was an organisation run on very traditional lines, targets, objectives, KPIs. And actually, my belief is if you trust people to make the right decisions and you empower their decision making, they're going to make much smarter decisions. So in our example, we had a target to achieve. And the approach that I discussed with the people I was working with at the time was what would happen if we took away target-driven business and the fear of either punishment or the promise of excessive reward, and actually just said to people, let's think about this differently. What would happen if you did your best? What would happen if you're open, honest, and looked at what's possible? The upshot of that, by the time we'd finished the programme, was over a 300% improvement in profit by sitting with people, by listening to them, by creating a culture where they could experiment, where they were not going to be given the carrot or the stick, where we allowed them to come from a place of intrinsic motivation. 300% improvement. And for me, taking this approach, that's where it proves itself. So we've got to think about what we want organisations to achieve. Now, for me, I think organisations exist to serve customers, to serve the needs of people, whatever those needs might be. If people can conceive it, an organisation can be created to meet that need. But the other thing is organisations exist to employ. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody wants to be a leader. But when we choose that leadership role, we have a responsibility to the people that work for us, whether that's directly or indirectly in the new economy. And thirdly, an organisation should exist to enhance, to make things better, not to take things away. And I think at the moment what we see is far too much of organisations who are concerned about taking away, who are concerned about concentrating wealth in particular pockets. And that big shift for me has come when we've seen the move from organisations being owned by private individuals to more recent decades where they're owned by faceless institutions. We have depersonalised, and so my call is for the repersonalisation of the organisation. We can't sit here and say, I blame this organisation for doing that and that organisation for doing that. These organisations are made up of people, of individuals who are empowered each day to make decisions which affect all of us. So the old style organisation is hierarchical, and we can see it just builds in so many points where if people are not following a common objective, decisions can be taken and shaped which are out of alignment. Whereas if we come to a more central model and we have everybody very clear on the objective that unifies their organisation, the unification of vision, then we get much better decision making from a number of perspectives, a more balanced approach. So in creating teams, one of the things that I work with is this tool. And what we see in traditional organisations is people much more along the strategist and implementer lines. We need to also welcome people who are future focused, people who can create changes, people who can take what exists already and make it better. So thinking about what matters. The factors that matter for most people, regardless of whether they're the CEO of a company or whether they're the person that works on the reception desk, if you take them as individuals, these common things matter to us all, and that's quality of life. It's our values, and we're seeing more and more people now who are leaving the corporate structure because they find that they're living out of line with their values. And that creates a cognitive dissonance, and they have to go and find the new. Now, I'm hopeful that these are the people that are going to create the new. They're going to create the new organisations that are going to serve people in a different way. Wealth creation and creation of value. So wealth is not just in fiscal terms. That can be in terms of health. It can be in terms of happiness. And I think we've got to reconsider how we perceive wealth. But it's coming back to then, how do we create fair distribution of that? And these are the challenges that we need to look at to engage people. I don't think, at a personal level, it is right that we have organisations that pay CEOs 50, 60, 100 times multiples of what they are paying that person on the front desk. Everybody contributes to a business, and we've got to create flatter structures and better distribution models to help move things forward. So what would a new breed look like? A new breed would focus on human connection. And when I've seen organisations model this, where people listen to people as people rather than treat people as a task to be interacted with, they bring warmth, compassion, choice, empathy, and the absolute key is thriving, not surviving. Nobody should be going to work thinking, I only have 25 more hours, 12 more hours to do this week before I'm done and it's the weekend. We need to change that. If people are allowed to play to their talents, they are going to be able to come up with better solutions, do their work faster. So in my experience, the best people I worked with did not necessarily care about hours put in. They cared about value created. They cared about impact. And we need to come off of the treadmill and begin to look at things in these much more practical terms instead of creating industries of busyness. We should be looking at potential and, as I explained earlier, removing limitations. Let's take off ceilings and targets, and let's move to the cultures which have been around in management theory for years of Kaizen and constant improvement and refinement of what we do. We do not need a target to drive somebody towards that. So let's consider the art of the possible. Rather than limit your team's thinking if you're a leader, ask them what's possible. Be open to ideas. Diversity. And diversity is key for any organisation, whether it's a formal or informal organisation, because through this, we enrich the pool of the talent, where decisions come from, we remove biases, and we improve decision-making for that process. Individuation. And I think even though we're talking about greater collaboration and community, greater individuation, where we focus on personal responsibility, accountability, beliefs, and recognition and honouring of that for the individual, is going to be more and more important, particularly as we see in 2020, 50% of us are going to be self-employed or freelance. The traditional employment model is disintegrating. So we need to understand where our place is in that, and rather than look for employers to create for us and create structures, what structures do we choose to create for ourselves? What opportunities do we choose to create? So the future looks much more like this. Hubs and people across different hubs, and the ability to interwork. So the skills that we need for that are very different to the skills that we've needed for the last 20, 30, 50 years. So collaborative teams working across boundaries and within much more fluid organisations. And I was fortunate that the organisation I was working with and studied for most of my working career had this in place, but we understand strengths. So coming from a strengths-based perspective when we're working with each other. We're comfortable with diverse thinking and can listen without judgment to new ideas and fresh perspectives. The ability to have challenging conversations to come to better solutions is key. Having deep respect for those who are different to us or who may come from a different technical background or organisational background is important. And the biggest shift is the focus to the contribution of each individual rather than where they sit in a hierarchy and are they important enough to have a conversation with. Talk to all people at all levels. And for people who are leaders now, the biggest question and challenge is what if? What if I allow them to do that? Are they going to succeed or are they going to fail? And the biggest step towards that is allowing your teams, if you want to bring this style of leadership through, to allow them to take responsibility. Be a safe pair of hands and a safety net, but allow them to take responsibility, because effective action is knowing when to act and when not to act, when not to intervene, when to allow somebody to learn from the experience. So I just want to leave you with a thought, which is how does a better future look in your organisation and with the objectives that you are trying to achieve? Thank you.